Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 12th episode of the story in which Naruto is adopted at a young age. How far can he go if someone actually supports him? How will he influence the elemental nations? This story is from a writing bunny. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Naruto had heard that great excitement or danger washed away the tiredness and sleepiness and made you temporarily feel as fresh as if you had just gotten from your bed after a whole night's sleep. Now he wanted to have a few choice words with whoever came up with this crap. There was plenty of excitement around, his life and the lives of the three genin were in peril, and he still felt like he wanted to just lie down on the forest floor and sleep for a week. It turned the odds against them even further in this already uneven battle. Yet he mustered the strength for a wind jutsu to blow away Suzumabachi's bees. Then his tired senses noticed too late that Takashi had thrown an explosive ball at him and the blast threw him several paces. He landed close to Kuratsuchi's feet. The girl stabbed a kunai at him, but he managed to draw his ninjato and block her attack. He kicked at her knee, but she jumped away. He wondered if he fared so bad in this battle, how the three genin were doing. Neji activated his Byakugan. It allowed him to see perfectly what was going on. At the moment, three of their opponents were concentrating on Naruto. The fourth was just standing in the background. That was odd. Why didn't he attack yet? From what the Hyuga had gathered from their previous encounter, he was probably the strongest of the IWA group. Though the behavior bothered him, Neji decided not to dwell on it too much. If fate had decided that their strongest opponent wouldn't fight, then they should just accept its blessings and help Naruto. The Chunin needed it. He quickly analyzed which one of the IWA group was the most vulnerable to a surprise attack. The younger girl stood with her back to them, her fingers flying through seals in preparation for a jutsu, probably a genjutsu. Her attention was fully focused on Naruto. That made her an easy target. He quickly signaled his teammates, who both stood on guard, trying in vain to pierce the darkness with their inferior eyes, and the trio sprung into action. Kuratsuchi noticed the approaching danger in the last second. The Juken strike aimed to close the chakra flow to her internal organs hit only her right arm, making it temporarily useless. Her dodge brought her into the path of Tenten's shuriken, which scratched her thigh. She cried out in pain and anger. In the next moment Lee's kick slammed into her ribs, sending her flying. The commotion announced the rest of the IWA group that Team Guy had joined the battle. Small fries think they can play with big guys? Suzumabachi sneered. She commanded a part of her hive to deal with the three genin. Takashi just tossed one of his exploding clay balls between them. Tenten was relatively far from the explosion, so she was only knocked to the ground. But as she got up, she was attacked with the Kamizuru bees and their poisonous stingers. She could feel the poison spreading through her veins, slowing her down. Curse it, she thought. Now we are in trouble and we don't even have the sake to give to Lee. Neji was closer to it. As the blast threw him at a tree and the shrapnel bit into his flesh, he wished that he could learn the kaiden. With that technique, he could have defended against the explosion easily. But the kaiden was reserved for the main family, damn them. The moment I return, I'm going to learn the kaiden, whatever the main house says. But as he tried to get up and realized that his left leg refused to support him, he understood that they wouldn't return home to Konoha. They were going to die here. How could he ever think that they might get out of this? They never stood a chance against these opponents. Such was fate. Lee was the closest to the explosion. He didn't mind as the air slammed into him, he was used to worse from his training with Gai-sensei. The shards of clay were the problem. As he landed on the ground painfully, he realized that getting up would be hard. He could tell that he was seriously injured. But lying on the ground while his comrades were fighting would be unyouthful. He had to get up. But he couldn't the way he was. He'd have to remove his weights. But was he allowed to? Gai-sensei had given him strict rules on when he could remove them. Lee couldn't remember what they were. He had written them down, but it was too dark to read. "Forgive me, Gai-sensei, if I do something wrong, but I have to do it." He removed the weights. Suddenly getting up was much easier. Everything still hurt, but his flames of youth burned brightly and overcame the pain. He dashed forward, attacking Takashi. Kuratsuchi would have been an easier target, but attacking a wounded opponent and a girl would have been unyouthful. No matter how fast Lee was, Takashi was a jounin and therefore faster than the genin. As Lee sprinted to him, the IWA ninja kicked, hitting the younger green beast in the ribs and sending him flying. Rock Lee got up again, but this time slower. Takashi's kick aggravated his wounds. Before he could attack again, he noticed a clay bomb flying at him. He dodged, but it wasn't fast enough. The explosion threw him into a tree. This time he wasn't able to get up again, no matter how he invoked his flames of youth. He lay on the ground helplessly, cursing his unyouthfulness. Naruto blew a wind jutsu to sweep away Suzumabachi's bees and then swiftly dodged a volley of kunai from Kuratsuchi. He almost ran into the path of Takashi's explosive clay ball, but managed to avoid it with a kawarimi. The situation was dire. They were only alive because Rushi didn't join the battle yet. Then an explosion caught his attention. He watched as the genin team tried to attack and were promptly curb-stomped. Were they still alive? He couldn't tell. But he could already tell that he was failing his mission to protect them. He was failing to protect them. If they weren't dead already, they would be soon. And he couldn't do anything about it because he was barely holding his own. He felt red hot. Fury rising in him. He recognized it immediately. Any other time he would resist it valiantly, but not this time. Their situation was dire and there was nothing to lose anymore. He lifted his right hand to one of his small wounds and smeared the red line in blood. He opened himself to the power. The world turned red. Kuratsuchi fell to her knees when the wave of poisonous Kyubi's chakra slammed into her. It was just like when the monster had killed Akatsuchi, only this time it was much worse. "Rushi," she called the moment she found her voice. "Kill that thing." "What are you here for?" Rushi sighed. That pesky girl was ordering him around again. Oh, how he hated her. But she was right. He was there to deal with the Konoha Jinchuriki. Seeing how the currently two-tailed brat effortlessly swatted away Takashi's exploding balls and Suzumabachi's bees refused to come anywhere near the tainted red chakra, he was really the only one who could do anything about it. But he still absolutely hated it. "You know, you can just leave them here," Yanbi no Satori suggested. "The Kyubi will make a short work of them." "Shut up," Rushi replied, trying not to show how tempted he was by the idea. The Satori wasn't fooled, as was apparent from its chuckle. "We have a job to do." "As you wish," the Yanbi answered with a hint of irony in its voice. Then the familiar heat of the demon's chakra filled his veins. He was prepared to fight. Naruto was seething. The bastard responsible for the worst injuries of his team was right in front of him, throwing his clay balls at him. The Chunin swatted the tiny bombs away effortlessly. They were too weak to pierce through his chakra cloak. He noted the shock and surprise in the man's eyes as he realized that his technique wasn't working. He felt a sense of satisfaction. He was more than happy to make the worm feel even more shocked before killing him. A part of his mind tried to tell him that such bloodthirstiness wasn't him, but he didn't care. Takashi had hurt his genin, and despite knowing them only for a short while, Naruto came to care about them. Takashi threw another volley of clay bombs at him, using them as a smokescreen to get away. Naruto wasn't fooled. He leapt through the explosion, pouncing on the Iwa Jounin. It was so fast that Takashi could only scream in terror before Naruto tore him in two with his chakra claws. Then another wave of demonic chakra slammed into him. He sneered and turned around. The four-tailed ape stood there, currently only in three-tailed manifestation. It roared its challenge. Naruto answered in kind. Then the ground under his feet turned into lava. He jumped out and rushed towards the Iwa Jinchuriki. It erected a wall of lava in his path. Naruto slammed his tails into it and ran straight through. Roshi hit him with his tails. Naruto was knocked down, but he sprang to his feet quickly. The two demon containers engaged in a fierce taijutsu battle. Neji watched the fight with terror. The killing intent in the air was unbelievable. He didn't know what was going on, but he knew it was very bad. He had deactivated his Byakugan the moment Naruto had released the red chakra. The intensity of chakra threatened to blind him. He knew it was their fate to die here, but he couldn't help but feel scared. He didn't want to die. He had to get out of here. He had to help his teammates get out of here. He searched the surroundings for them. Tenten was crawling over the ground. The bees that had stung her had fled from the two demons, but their poison lingered. The kunoichi was barely able to move. Rock Lee was worse off. The bees hadn't even touched him, but he had been wounded by the explosion the most. He was slumped on the ground and Neji wasn't able to tell whether he was awake. He pushed himself to his hands and knees and crawled over to his fallen teammate. Lee, he called. The taijutsu specialist didn't answer. He was staring blankly at the two fighting Jinchuriki. He seemed to be in shock, but at least he was conscious. Lee, Neji repeated. Once again he got no answer. Lee. Neji called. Nothing. By that time, Tenten reached them. Lee, can you hear me? She asked. When he still didn't answer, she slapped him. That seemed to get through to him, because he blinked. Neji wondered why he hadn't thought of it. Tenten? Lee asked in a small voice. It was so at odds with his usual boisterous nature that it slammed home the point how badly wounded he was. We have to get out of here, Neji said. Running is unyouthful, the taijutsu specialist objected, but it lacked his usual conviction. At the moment, a dragon made of lava flew through the forest so close to them that it almost scorched them. It was shortly followed by a futon jutsu that stripped the trees above them of its leaves and knocked off the smaller branches. It's dangerous here, the weapon mistress pointed out. We have to get out of here quickly, the Hyuga amended his original statement. Rock Lee nodded. No matter how bright his flames of youth burned, he could understand that they stood no chance against this. Can you move? Tenten inquired. Lee tried it. He pushed himself to his hands and knees, but almost immediately collapsed with a pained yell. Not good, the girl frowned. We have to carry him, Neji said. The kunoichi looked at him oddly. They were unable to walk themselves. How were they supposed to carry their wounded comrade? But they couldn't leave him there. They had to manage. Somehow. In the end, each grabbed Lee under one arm and dragged him on the ground. It was slow going. The malicious chakra in the air made their breathing difficult and the jutsu the two combatants tossed in all directions made them scared that they would be hit at any moment. But by some miracle, all the techniques missed them. They were getting away from the source of danger. Or more likely, the two combatants were moving away from them. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they could breathe freely again and the lethal jutsu weren't flying so close to them anymore. Soon, they will be out of danger. They needed it. Even without medical training, they could tell that Lee's condition was serious and worsening and the poison in Tenten's veins was slowly spreading. They needed to stop and treat him as best as they could. Just a little longer and it would be possible. Well, a familiar and definitely unfriendly voice spoke. So the worms are trying to crawl away? TSK, we can't have that. Worms have to be squashed, a second voice added. Niji and Tenten looked up in stunned disbelief. Kuratsuchi and Suzumabachi stood there, both their faces twisted in a mask of rage and hate. The two Iwa kunoichi had fled the danger zone near the two Jinchuriki's fight and waited on the perimeter for whoever would try to escape. Tenten couldn't believe their rotten luck. After all they did to escape, were they really going to perish here? She reached for her trusty kunai, but she knew it wasn't going to be enough. Niji just sighed and closed his eyes in resignation. So it was their fate to die here. How could he have ever believed anything else? With Naruto snarled as Rushi's lava attack slammed into him. He swung his tails at the opponent, but the Iwa ninja avoided them easily. The battle wasn't going his way. Rushi was using 3 tails of chakra and he only 2. And he also seemed to be more in control. As a result, the Yonbi Jinchuriki was tossing him around. Naruto felt the urge to just pull on more chakra and smash the stupid monkey, but he suppressed it. He couldn't give in to the Kyuubi's temptations. This was as much chakra as he could handle without losing control completely. Even this was almost too much. The rage was threatening to consume him. He wasn't sure that he would be able to suppress the chakra again. But he couldn't dwell on it now. He had to deal with the old man from Iwa first. And he needed to keep a cool head for that. Because without a strategy, he would be screwed. He dodged a punch and quickly jumped away from a patch of soil that suddenly turned into lava. He sprung at Rushi, attempting to punch him, but the Iwa Jinchuriki twisted to the side and kicked his torso. The chakra cloak blocked most of the hit, but it still sent him flying. What did he just say about strategy? He should listen to his own advice. Well, so what did he so far find out about his opponent? Rushi was strong, skilled, and his chakra cloak protected him from most attacks. Very few of Naruto's attacks connected and even fewer did any damage. He'd need something more powerful to get through his defenses. The problem was that using the Kyuubi's chakra disturbed Naruto's chakra control, so his attempts at jutsu had unpredictable results, usually nothing too dangerous for the enemy. As Rushi nearly buried him under a lava waterfall, Naruto wondered whether he should lower the use of Kyuubi's chakra he was using to gain better control of it. But would it be worth the risk? He was sure that if he had any less power at his disposal, he wouldn't have escaped Rushi's last technique. But if he progressed this way, he was going to lose sooner or later anyway. Probably sooner than later, he thought as Rushi's tail sent him flying. He needed to end this fast and do it without resorting to using more of his tenant's chakra. He needed some move that would put all his power into one concentrated attack and then hit the Iwa Jinchuriki head-on. Of all the techniques he knew, the one that packed the most destructive potential was the Rasengan. But that was hard to perform correctly even under the best of circumstances. Now, he wouldn't be able to keep the ball properly focused. Not even if he used both hands. One-handed version was something he still struggled with, so it was out of the question. But maybe he didn't need a perfect Rasengan. Even the incomplete version was dangerous enough. If he just sent Rushi flying, he could follow up his attack. Now if he only could concentrate long enough to form the vortex. Rushi seemed determined not to allow his opponent the time necessary to use any powerful technique. He needed some distraction. There wasn't much he could do. The landscape around them was desolate and heated by the Yonbi's chakra, nearly melting and tricky to stand on. It was something that gave the Iwa Shinobi an advantage. Naruto had to change it. Despite his instincts and Kyuubi's voice screaming for him to attack, he turned around and ran. Exactly as he expected, Rushi pursued him. The Iwa ninja was fast. Naruto had to try hard to stay ahead. Fortunately he didn't have to run far. Just a bit off their original battlefield, trees grew taller and thicker than was usual in the forest. Naruto headed straight for them. As he ran between them, he smashed his tails into the trunks of 2 nearby trees. The wood couldn't withstand the destructive power and began falling right into Rushi's path. The Yonbi Jinchuriki just grunted and smashed the falling trees with his own tails. Splinters and logs rained onto him. He batted them away and ran on, but not without a couple of seconds of delay. And that was all Naruto needed. As Rushi ran through the obstacle, the Chunin was already waiting on him with a swirling ball of chakra in his palms. It wasn't a completed Rasengan by any measure, and Jiraiya would probably scold him if he saw it, but it was enough to fulfill its purpose. When Rushi thought he had caught his prey, he found himself faced with the chakra vortex instead. He had just enough time to look surprised before the attack slammed into his chest. The concentrated chakra of the incomplete Rasengan drilled through Rushi's chakra cloak and reached his flesh. Naruto realized that he was losing control over the technique. In a moment of panic, he fed it with more chakra. The ball exploded, throwing both the combatants in opposite directions. With Team Guy, so how are we going to kill them? Kuratsuchi asked. We can just slice their throats, but that would be too quick. After chasing them all the way here, I want some fun. I agree, Suzumabachi said. When we can't kill the blonde brat personally, we have to make do with these three weaklings. They aren't even worthy dirtying our kunai. Maybe I should just let my bees sting them to death. And where would be the fun for me? Kuratsuchi objected. There are three of them, Suzumabachi pointed out. Even if one of them is almost dead. Just pick whichever you want to kill personally. I'll deal with the others. Why would you get two and I only one? Kuratsuchi asked angrily. Well, the Kamizuru shrugged, the ugly one will die on his own, so that leaves one for each of us. Fair enough, Kuratsuchi shrugged. I'll pick the bitch. Then I'm left with the Hyuga pansy, Suzumabachi shrugged. Well, I never liked pansy boys. The two Iwa Kunoichi started towards them. Tenten gripped her kunai tighter. Despite the poison coursing through her veins and making her movement sluggish, she was determined to fight until her last breath. Even if they had no chance to survive, they were going to deal as much damage as they could. As she saw Kuratsuchi draw her own kunai with a bloodthirsty smirk, Tenten threw her own weapon. The kunai struck Kuratsuchi in the stomach and was stopped by her flak jacket. The Tsuchikige's granddaughter smirked maliciously. Is that all you can do? You tree huggers are even weaker than I've thought. I can't understand how did your pathetic village last so long. Seeing Tenten's desperate attempt, Niji was a bit ashamed that he didn't do anything. But what could he do? Both rock women were too far away to use Juken. And it would probably do them no good anyway. Fate had already decided that they would die here. Suzumabachi commanded her bees to fly. So he was going to be stung to death. That wasn't a good death for a warrior. But what could he expect? He was just a lowly member of the branch house. He should be glad that he had the honor of dying in battle and not after the activation of the caged bird seal. But the stings never came. Instead there was a dull thud. Dynamic entry, a familiar voice shouted. Niji lifted his head. Was he hallucinating, or did Gai-sensei just appear out of nowhere and kick Suzumabachi so hard she flew a good 10 meters? Suzumabachi cursed. She didn't see what hit her and where did it come from, but she immediately commanded her bees to attack it. It did her little good. Guy moved so fast that the insects couldn't catch up with him. He appeared next to her in her instant and kicked her with all his might. Her world went black. Guy turned around. Where was the second enemy? He couldn't see her anywhere. Kuratsuchi, once she had realized that the situation had changed drastically, had used a jutsu to disappear underground and fled. Mato Guy could feel where she was and his first instinct was to pursue her. But Gai-sensei. Tenten's voice stopped him. Lee's bad off. His precious Lee, all of his youthful students, were more important to him than some escaping enemy. The moment he had seen the explosion of Bijou chakra on the horizon, he had discarded his weights immediately, opened the initial gate and raced towards its source, leaving his companions in the dust. And now he found his youthful students and saw they needed help. He couldn't abandon them for anything. He was no medic, but he had some basic knowledge and a first aid kit. He began applying it as best as he could. With Naruto picked himself from the ground. Everything hurt, but Kyubi was already taking care of the injuries. He could move freely. He looked around, searching for his enemy. He was alone. Where was Rushi? Sure, the blast couldn't have thrown him too far. But he couldn't see him anywhere. He couldn't feel him either. That was strange. The Yonbi's host should shine like a beacon, especially if he was using his tenant's chakra. Surely the explosion wasn't enough to kill him? A Jinchuriki could withstand much worse. So what could have possibly happened? Naruto didn't know. And he didn't care. He just wanted to find his opponent and finish the battle. He started off into the forest in search of him. Naruto. He had no idea how long he had been searching in vain when the voice broke into his thoughts. It sounded familiar. Who was it? He couldn't remember. It doesn't matter. Kill them, Kyubi suggested. It sounded like a good idea. There were enemies around. They've hurt, killed, somebody. Who? It didn't matter. The enemies had killed somebody and they ran away before he could take his revenge on them. He had to take his revenge on someone. He had to kill someone. That's how it's supposed to be, Kyubi grinned happily. Naruto, the voice called again. It was closer now. And it was a woman's voice. Hey, that was wrong. Wasn't his opponent a man? There were women with him too, the demon fox reminded him. It's one of them. Kill her. But that sounded wrong. This wasn't the voice of an enemy. But why couldn't he remember who did it belong to? Does it matter? There are enemies all around. Kill her before she kills you. That made sense. They were alone among enemies. They couldn't count on getting any help. Whoever this woman was, he should just kill her before she could cause him any more harm. Demonic chakra surging, he headed towards the source of the voice. Inside his mind, the nine-tailed demon smirked triumphantly. Naruto, the voice sounded for the third time. This time the boy could see its source. The girl was standing there, looking at him, her hands empty. She wasn't expecting a fight. If he pounced at her now, she wouldn't be able to defend. Do it. Kill her while she's defenseless. But Naruto still hesitated. Why should he kill her? Just do it. Kyubi sounded impatient. This is the perfect chance. A dog barked. Naruto blinked. What was a dog doing here? Only Hana had dogs and Hana wasn't here. Then he looked at the girl again. It was Hana. How comes he didn't recognize her earlier? Kill her. Kyubi demanded angrily. No. Naruto shouted. Curse it, the wretched kitsune had almost gained control of him again. How could it have happened? Probably because he had used its power for too long at once. How much time had passed since he had begun his battle with Rushi? He couldn't tell, but it felt like hours. Kill her, the demon fox demanded in a voice that didn't suffer disobedience. Red-hot anger seethed and threatened to consume Naruto's consciousness. No, the Chunin shouted, turning the rage he felt against his tenant. You aren't going to control me. Never. I'm the master here. Don't get so cocky, mortal. You can never control my power, the Bijou raged. Naruto concentrated on pushing it back. It was hard. It got a solid hold on him during the fight. But Naruto was nothing if not persistent. It took a lot of struggle, but he prevailed. The Kyuubi was locked safely in its cage again. Naruto collapsed to his knees, panting heavily. This battle had taken a lot out of him and he had been exhausted before it even began. The only reason he didn't faint right away was that everything hurt too much. But why did it hurt? Kyuubi had healed all his wounds almost immediately. And the pain wasn't coming from any wound, it permeated his whole body. Naruto! Hana cried as she rushed to him and caught him before he hit the ground. Are you alright? That was a stupid question. Couldn't she see that he wasn't alright? But it was nothing serious. He hoped. He had trouble thinking. He was just too tired. He wanted to ask what was his teammate doing there when she was supposed to be recovering in Konoha, but opening his mouth would take too much energy. He briefly wondered what had happened to the Genin team, but he was too tired to hold on that thought. His eyes closed on their own volition. Soon, he fell asleep. With Rushi grunted as he climbed to his feet. That last hit with whatever it was really hurt. Once he might have just shrugged it off, but that had been years, if not decades ago. Now he was just too old for this kind of crap. Being tossed around was something he would gladly live without. That Konoha Jinchuriki had some quite powerful technique if he was able to break through his chakra cloak so easily. He suspected some of his ribs were broken. The Yonbi would take care of it eventually, but what to do about the Kyuubi brat in the meantime? Use even the fourth tail? Rushi hated doing that. The chakra was too much to handle safely. But it was the only way to win. Why do you bother? Yonbi no Satori asked. What do you mean? Why does it matter if you win? Because, just because. He was in no mood for his tenant's arguments. He could be sometimes. Almost as annoying as the Tsuchikage's little brat. He didn't want to deal with her or the exalted midget himself in case he failed. Look around carefully, the four-tailed ape advised him. Who do you feel? Rushi stretched his senses. He had learned long ago that if the Yonbi ever said something like that, he'd better pay attention. It proved true this time too. He couldn't feel his companions anywhere. Wait, he could feel Kuratsuchi, but just barely. The girl was far away and running fast. It wasn't hard to figure out why. 3 new chakra signatures appeared in the vicinity and 2 of them were really strong. Elite Jounin. So the Konoha brats got reinforcements. Figures. Just his luck. He was really too old, injured and tired to fight them now. We should just make ourselves scarce, shouldn't we? The Satori suggested. I agree, Rushi answered, already starting to run. It's a long way back to IWA. He sighed when he imagined the reception that was awaiting him there. The Tsuchikage wasn't going to be happy that he had failed the mission and lost 2 of his elite jounin in the process. Do we even have to return to IWA? Yonbi asked. Well, Rushi mused, that's something worth consideration. With the Konoha shinobi everybody gathered on a small clearing. Team Guy and Naruto were lying on the ground and the 3 members of the rescue team were working on them, trying to patch them up to the best of their abilities. Which unfortunately wasn't much. Guy-sensei, Niji asked. What are you doing here? Looking after my youthful students, of course, the green beast answered. I'm sorry I left you alone for so long. But, how did you find us? The Hyuga didn't understand. Why did the jounin appear so suddenly? How did they know where to find them? He had been so sure that they were fated to die. We tracked you. The most youthful Inuzuka Kunoichi and her companions helped us, the jounin explained. But why were you tracking us? Niji questioned. Because you're my precious students. The moment I returned to Konoha and realized you were missing, I wouldn't rest until I found you. The green beast didn't understand how could his student ask such a question. Did he doubt that he would do everything in his power to protect his students? How unyouthful. I thought it was our fate to die here, the Hyuga prodigy said. Even now, he still didn't understand how they were alive. Fate sometimes worked in mysterious ways. His head began to hurt when he tried to comprehend it. Don't say such things, Mato-gai scolded him. It's unyouthful. Niji for once didn't even grimace. If your flames of youth burn high, you can get out of anything. At that moment, the Hyuga boy almost believed him. Did you say something? Kakashi asked from behind his orange book. My eternal rival. So hip. I'll have to train hard to match his hip attitude. Stop it. Hana shouted. Shouldn't you be helping the wounded? The two jounin looked a bit abashed. This is no time for reading and fooling around. If you are finished, we should get them back to Konoha quickly. There is only so much I can do for them. Will Lee be alright? Guy asked worriedly. That depends on how soon he'd see a real doctor, the vet answered. She didn't know nearly enough about human anatomy to be sure. The reminder of their situation was enough to make them stop their shenanigans. Soon the group was ready to move, the 4 children being carried. The journey to Konoha was going to be long. Konoha, the journey back seemed endless. Considering they had to carry 3 wounded, they couldn't go as fast as they wanted to. At least Naruto woke up at noon the next day, and while he wasn't completely rested, he could at least move under his own power. But after 3 days of travel, they finally walked through the gates of Konoha. They rushed to the hospital, leaving the wounded in the care of the medics. They were at first worried about Lee, but then they called Tsunade for assistance and she assured them she was able to fix the boy. It was going to take weeks before he would be able to return to active duty, but he was going to be all right. Then came the time to report the whole mess to the Hokage. The old man listened solemnly to their words. Then he asked some questions like, where did the Four-Tails Jinchuriki ran off? Can you confirm the guy is dead? Did you meet the traitor before this mission? They answered to their best abilities. I should have expected something like that to happen, the Sandaime concluded. We're going to do everything to root out the traitors, but it will take some time. In the meantime, be very careful, all of you, but especially you, Naruto. And you can all take a week off before taking missions again. That's all I wanted to say, so you can go now. I hope the next time we'll meet under better circumstances. Thank you, Hokage-sama, they answered before leaving the office. Once they were out of the tower, they bid goodbyes to each other. Everybody wondered when, how, and whether they would meet again. Hyuga compound Hinata sat quietly in the corner, listening to Niji giving report of his latest mission to her father. It was all she could do not to gasp in terror at some of the moments. It was so dangerous. She wondered how her cousin had survived it. Having 4 enemy ninja, including some jounin after him? That sounded almost like certain death to Hinata's ears. She couldn't imagine herself lasting longer than half an hour in such a situation. And she was supposed to graduate the academy soon. It was still a couple of months away, but it could as well be tomorrow in Hinata's mind. She couldn't imagine getting good enough in such a short time. Her cousin Niji was a genius, everybody could see that. Even her little sister Hanabi was talented. Hinata glanced to where the younger girl was sitting at their father's side. Aged just 5, Hanabi was more of a proper daughter of the Hyuga main house than Hinata could ever hope to be. She sat perfectly straight, her face not showing any emotion of Niji's tale. And her training was progressing much faster than Hinata's. Soon, she would surpass Hinata's ability in Juken. Hinata had to suppress a sigh as she looked down. Once again she wished she hadn't been born as the oldest child of the clan head. There were so many expectations placed on her position and she could never fulfill them adequately. She could see it in everybody's eyes, especially her father's. It would have been much better if Hanabi had been born first. Hayashi liked Hanabi. She could live up to his expectation. It would have been even better if Niji could have been the heir. Niji was always able to surpass all expectations. But Niji was just a branch house member, so that was never going to be. This time she didn't manage to suppress her sigh in time, which earned her a disapproving glance from her father. Hinata looked down. She forced herself to listen more closely to what Niji was saying. It was an almost unbelievable tale, but she didn't doubt her cousin's veracity. So there was a ninja in Konoha who was just as young as her and was already able to go toe-to-toe with Jounin. Hinata admired such strength and wished she could sometimes be like him. But she knew that was unrealistic. Niji might become so strong, Hanabi might come close, but she would consider a success if she could be mediocre. And mediocre wasn't enough for the future head of the Hyuga clan. The Hyuga clan head had to be strong, shining above other ninja and other clan heads. Nothing less was enough for the most noble clan in Konoha. Hinata knew that she was never going to reach such heights. And in a few short months, she was going to graduate the academy, be placed on a genin team and start doing missions and most likely failing them horribly. If she ever ended up on a mission as dangerous as Niji's was, she was going to end up dead. And then Hanabi could be the heiress and everything would work out alright. Maybe it would be better if she just died. Would anybody miss her? Certainly not Niji. There was never anything but contempt in his eyes when he looked at her. She knew he was blaming her for his father's death. She did everything in her power to make it up, but it was never enough. It could be never enough. Would her father miss her? It was obvious that Hayashi preferred Hanabi, but sometimes she thought that her father cared a bit, that there was hope in his eyes that Hinata would suddenly become strong, but Hinata never did and that hope disappeared quickly. Its appearances were also becoming rarer. So her father would get over her death easily too. And Hanabi? Hanabi once used to be such a sweet little child, always smiling when Hinata played with her, but that had changed not too long after Hanabi had begun her training in the Hyuga's clan arts. After months of hearing how she was doing well and how Hinata had never been any good at it, Hanabi started sneering at her elder sister. She now thought that she was so much better than Hinata and that associating with such a failure as Hinata would only hinder her progress. And so the two sisters became estranged. So Hanabi wasn't going to miss her too. She'd probably only sneer at her grave and say that she always knew that Hinata wouldn't last. Hinata hoped that at least her mother would have missed her. Her mother had been always so sweet, loving and caring. But her mother had died shortly after Hanabi had been born. Hinata still missed her dearly. So who else could miss her? The clan elders? Certainly not. To them, she was the shame of the Hyuga clan. Some branch house members? Maybe. Hinata had always been kind to them, more than other main house members, but she was never sure what it meant to them. So they might miss her some, but they weren't any close. And her classmates? She didn't have any real friends among them. Sometimes, she doubted whether some of them even knew she existed. So they wouldn't miss her too. It was really very depressing to think about it like that. Hinata tried to find something positive about her life, but she couldn't remember anything. She just watched as Niji concluded his report and Hayashi dismissed him. Then she slipped out of the room too. Hokage's office. Sarutobi looked at the reports on his desk ruefully. All the leads got them nowhere. Though Ibiki had managed to pry the name of his contact from Mizuki, the ANBU couldn't find said contact, so it got them nowhere. And Mizuki knew very little else. It wasn't a good situation. They knew they had traitors inside Konoha, but they couldn't discern who they were. They knew only that whoever was selling them out was too smart to get caught in the traps the counterintelligence set for them. The Hokage contemplated whether he should call Jiraiya back. The self-proclaimed super pervert was good at finding out information that eluded everyone else. But Jiraiya's skill was needed elsewhere. There was no one else who could find out what their enemies were up to. Just last month he had saved a whole battalion of Konoha forces when he had warned them about a Kumo offensive that would have otherwise caught them unprepared. So no, the third really couldn't afford to lose this source of information. But that left him with very little options. He could only continue in what they were doing, give more orders to the intelligence department and the ANBU and hope that the traitor would eventually slip. It wasn't very optimistic. But in a war, few things were. Streets of Konoha. Not long after leaving the Hokage tower they met Hotaru. The girl was limping, but she looked happy. "Naruto," she called when she saw them. "What have you been up to? I've heard you've been fighting some jounin." Rumors really travel fast," Hana muttered. "That's true," Naruto answered Hotaru's question. "Why would you do it?" "It's dangerous," the purple-haired kunoichi said. "Believe me, I'd rather not do it, but it wasn't like I had a choice," the boy replied. "Why so serious?" Hotaru raised an eyebrow. "I was joking. I'm in no mood for jokes." That's a new one," Hotaru said. "If you saw the state we found them in you wouldn't feel like laughing too," Hana interjected. "That bad?" "Yes. Worse," Hana and Naruto said simultaneously. "That sounds like I missed some big action," Hotaru sighed. "Getting wounded really sucks." "Tell me about it," the Inuzuka said. "Just get well soon and you can get into some action again," Naruto tried to cheer her up. "That's easier said than done," Hotaru sighed. "Not everybody heals as fast as you." "Whatever," Naruto rolled his eyes. "Just heal fast, so we can take missions as a team again, will you? Going alone sucks." The kunoichi smiled. "Deal." Konoha life became a routine again. Tenzo returned from the front lines and they began taking missions together again. It was mostly routine ninja work. They knew they would have to return to the front lines eventually, but unless the war took a sudden turn for worse, which thankfully didn't happen yet, they had several months of relatively light duty to look forward to. They didn't grumble when they had to guard caravans going at a snail's pace along dusty roads, or spoiled noblemen who complained about their presence as much as they required it. It was also then when they received their first assassination mission. Hot Springs Country. The landscape was beautiful. The southern regions of the land of the hot springs were one of the must-see places of the Shinobi world. Lush green forests covered sides of numerous cone-shaped mountains. The mountain range reached as far as they could see, disappearing in blue hue on the horizon. Steam from the numerous hot springs that gave this country its name rose to the clear blue sky. Down in the valleys bright green rice grew on fertile fields. It was a paradise to behold. But beautiful scenery and lush fields weren't everything Hot Springs Country could boast. It had also a good strategic location. Bordering on the fire country and having many ports from which ships could sail to water country, lightning country, whirlpool country or anywhere further than that, the country was a trade center for the eastern regions of the elemental continent. This was where Fujita Yukito had his base. Fujita Yukito was a trader like many in this area. He bought whatever was cheap and sold it wherever people were willing to pay the most for it, not caring whether it was legal or not. He had a good idea of what, where and when was going to be in demand, so his business was prospering more than most of his competitors. Recently, he had started supplying the Kumo army with Kiri medical herbs and ores for chakra-conducting metal from the fire country. Konoha didn't like this one bit and decided to do something about him and simultaneously send a message to all of his colleagues. And this is where Team Tenzo came in. They got the intel that Fujita was going to be in the village of Toyoke, negotiating a deal on cheap timber and enjoying the local hot springs resort in the meantime. Toyoke wasn't a big settlement. It wasn't exactly tiny, but there lived just enough people to know each other by sight. And because some of the neighboring villages had better hot springs and/or better view of the mountains, it wasn't a tourist center either. Strangers would be spotted quickly. That made Team Tenzo's job harder. They needed to gather more information on their target in order to formulate a plan of action, and they couldn't use the customary method of sending a horde of disguised Naruto clones in. But they didn't mind too much. It added to the challenge. Missions had been boring lately. Toyoke Square, near the center of the village square, a young girl was juggling with brightly colored balls. Close to her feet, a boy of perhaps 3 years was toddling around, holding a wooden bowl and lifting it to the onlookers. Inside lay a handful of coins collected from the spectators. The girl was called Yuriko, and she was a traveling performer, showing off her skills with juggling to support her baby brother Haruki after their parents had died and they had to sell their farm to pay for their father's debts in the local sake house. Yuriko looked like she was going to be very sexy one day, and Haruki was cuteness personified. They were also both Naruto's clones. When you can't prevent standing out, then stand out in a spectacular way and make everybody notice you as something you are not. That was the tactic Team Tenzo decided to implement. So the two clones now stood at the one location of the village everybody had to pass through sooner or later and looked for any sign of their target. They didn't have to wait long. There was no sign of Fujita, but 2 ninja appeared among the audience. Their young age and lack of flak jackets marked them as genin. Their hitayate marked them as being from Kyumo. And they looked vaguely familiar. Naruto would bet his pay for this mission that they were Fujita's guards. The girl clone continued juggling as if nothing happened. The toddler clone weaved between the legs of the crowd to get closer to the 2 genin, trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. "I don't see why you are so interested, the boy just said. "I can juggle better." The kunoichi rolled her eyes. "That's just like you, Nuki," she sighed. "Always seeing only the superficial. Try thinking for a change." "Hey!" Nuki scowled. "What do you mean?" "Think. I think even you can figure it out," AI suggested. "You like that cute kid?" the boy tried. "Of course not," the kunoichi scoffed. "I'm checking out suspicious people." "What suspicious people?" "Them," she said, shaking her head in disbelief at her teammate's stupidity. "Them?" Nuki looked at Yuriko. "They're just kids." "So are we," AI pointed out. "We are ninja." Nuki protested. "I know," the girl sighed. "And how do you know she isn't?" "She's just some street performer." "She could be undercover," AI pointed out. "Nah," Nuki shook his head. "A real ninja could juggle better." Which was exactly the reason why Yuriko didn't juggle better. "You're probably right, but I had to make sure," AI sighed. "Let's go back to the pine tree." They both turned and left. Haruki couldn't follow them on his short feet without being too obvious about it, but he didn't have to. He now knew which one of the 3 inns in Toyoke did Fujita lodge in. He reached into his pocket, where a clone of Naruto disguised as a mouse was, and dispelled it, informing the original of what he learned. Then he returned back to his sister. Pine Tree. In the Pine Tree was the biggest of the 3 inns in Toyoke. It stood close to the village square. It wasn't a new building, but it was in good repair, with fresh paint still shining. It was also clean, with little garbage littering the streets around it. Yet a stray dog was sniffing around it, looking for something to eat anyway. It looked too healthy and well-fed to be living on the streets for too long, so it must have escaped its owner only recently. A guest walking into the inn looked scared of the big animal. The proprietor of the Pine Tree chased it away with a broomstick, but soon after he returned inside, the dog came back as well. He waited. 2 young people arrived at the inn. They were different from the regular visitors. It wasn't just because they were younger, the dog could smell the power on them. Both the boy and the girl. It served as a confirmation that he was waiting at the right place. He waited longer for when the target would appear. It took over an hour before 3 people finally arrived. 2 of them were ninja, one of them obviously very strong. The third wasn't. That was the person he had been waiting for. He sniffed the air, memorizing his scent. He'd needed to determine which room did he lodge in. He would have followed them inside, but the proprietor would just chase him away again and that would draw unwanted attention to him. He gave the trio a while to reach their chambers. Then he started moving around the building, sniffing the air carefully. There. The scent of the target was strong. So they dwelled on the ground floor, close to the back of the building. That was all he needed to know. With that, one of the Himura siblings ran to report to his mistress. Near Toyoke Team Tenzo discussed their plan. The 3 Chunin had to be careful if they wanted to get at a target protected by a jounin without attracting his attention. Though their sensei could have carried the mission on his own, as a former ANBU he was good at such things, he decided to let his students do it on their own to gather experience. He remained on standby, intending to intervene only if something went wrong. The 3 Chunin quickly decided that the best way to get around the Kyumo jounin was to wait until the target was guarded only by the genin. They spent a whole day following them around, mostly using Naruto's clones disguised as wildlife, only to realize that Fujita was never alone with only the Kyumo genin. That was an unpleasant surprise. It was made even more unpleasant by the fact that the traitor had concluded his business dealings and planned to leave Toyoke the next day. That put them on a tight schedule. If Fujita's group left, they would have to ambush them on the road and that would mean an all-out battle. That carried a great risk of injuries or even defeat, so the team wanted to avoid it. They had to strike and disappear before the Kyumo ninja realized what happened. They discussed it long and hard and couldn't find any way to eliminate the target without alerting his guards. That meant they needed a good diversion. Fortunately, during their stay in Toyoke they spotted something that would do just fine. Pine Tree Inuki was cursing his luck for getting the late night shift. He really wasn't a morning person. And now he had to wake up long before the sky began to lighten and stay awake for the whole day. But he was a proud ninja of Kyumogakure and he could deal with such hardships. He could deal with worse. But, he thought as he yawned, it would have been much easier to deal with them if he wasn't so sleepy. He shook his head to clear it. It helped for a bit, but soon his eyes were drooping again. I can't fall asleep here, he thought. He shuddered when he imagined what Kei-sensei would do if he caught him dozing off when he was supposed to be on guard. He could just hear the stern lecture that would precede the real punishment. Can you imagine what would happen if enemy ninja attacked? Nuki almost chuckled. What would enemy ninja do here? This place was in the middle of nowhere, very far from where all the action was. And they were just on a C-rank mission anyway. There was no chance of running into opposition with ninja skills. Though there had been that one time, he shuddered when he remembered how they failed their first C-rank mission of protecting the wares of a pottery merchant. But that had been a fluke. There was no way there would be a chase going through their room here. Almost as soon as he thought it, he noticed a strange noise coming from the door. Don't tell me. His sleepiness suddenly gone, he grabbed a kunai in his fist and jumped to his feet. He strained his ears. There was it again. Metal scratching against metal. What was it? Was somebody trying to pick the lock? Probably. Was it an enemy ninja? Nuki's heart beat faster. If there really were ninja here. But no. No ninja would ever make that much noise while trying to get into somebody's room. Even academy trainees would do better. So it meant that it was just a random burglar. He didn't have to wake up his team, he could deal with it on his own. And in the morning Kei-sensei would praise him for a job well done. With the thought of future glory firmly in mind, the Kyumo genin smiled and walked silently towards the door. There was a faint click indicating that the lock was slowly giving way. Nuki's lips twisted in a cruel smirk. Then he flung the door open. Kaya! Nuki flinched as the person on the other side of the door screamed at the top of his lungs. After that brief moment of hesitation, he wasted no more time and brought his kunai down. It hit the kneeling intruder in the shoulder. He screamed again. Then suddenly Kei-sensei stood beside him and grabbed the burglar by the throat, finally silencing him. But it was already too late. The racket had roused the whole inn already. "What's wrong?" you asked, quickly getting out of bed. "Where's the fire?" AI inquired. "Help. I'm going to be murdered." Fujita-san panicked. "Don't worry, we'll protect you," the kunoichi assured him, but it didn't have much effect. Their client was still trembling like a leaf. By that time the doors of other rooms were opening and sleepy lodgers were trying to find out what was going on. Kei told them that nothing, but it didn't sound very convincing considering he was holding a bloody body. "I'm going to die," Fujita whined. "My heart can't take the shock." He was clutching his chest desperately. AI thought that he was just being theatrical. "I'm a doctor," one of the other guests said. "Let me see him." She didn't wait for an answer and pushed by Nuki, Kei and his captive. "Hey!" you shouted. "We can't let strange people near our client." "I'm going to die," the client whimpered pathetically and gasped for air. At that moment AI realized that he might be actually having trouble. "We can't let him die of heart attack either," she pointed out. At that moment it seemed like an entirely real possibility to her. Kei looked like he wanted to say something to it, but at that moment the burglar began struggling in his grip and one of the onlookers shrieked in terror and another walked up to him and demanded answers, not specifying to what, which distracted him long enough. The medic meanwhile walked over to Fujita and began checking his vitals. "It's going to be good," she said after a while. "You had a nasty shock, but you are in no danger." "I still feel bad," the merchant said, but he didn't sound so desperate anymore. "I can give you something to help you sleep," she offered. Fujita looked grateful. "Wait," Kei's voice stopped them in their tracks. The Jounin had finally convinced the denizens of the Pine Tree Inn that they shouldn't poke their noses in Kumo Ninja's business and was free to deal with the client again. "I can't allow you to give our client some unknown substance." "It's just sedatives," the medic pointed out. "That's what you say," Kei countered. "Many assassinations were done by false doctors." "What?" The woman blinked in shock, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "And you?" the Jounin turned to his students. "Why did you let her near him?" "He was sick," Ai pointed out. "He needed a doctor." "And how did you know she's really a doctor?" Kei questioned. "Did it occur to you that she might be an enemy?" AI looked ashamed. Fujita looked scared and clutched his chest again. "Such rudeness," the doctor spat. "I'm only trying to help here and this is how you repay me?" "Sorry," you shrugged and smiled sheepishly. He too thought their sensei was being paranoid, though he understood everything Kei had said. "Now here are the sleeping pills," the doctor said, offering them on her open palm. "No," Kei refused, trying to make up for his earlier lapse in diligence. The medic just shrugged. "Well, I'll leave them here in case you change your mind," she said, laid the pills on a nightstand and left. Well, this was a job well done, Nuki smiled as the door closed behind her. Inuzuka Hana had to suppress a smile as she stepped over the lifeless carcass of the street thug they had hired to be the diversion. No chance of him telling just who had given him the tip, even if he had seen through their disguise. She felt a pang of guilt for sending him to his death, but he had been an unrepentant criminal with hands stained in blood. The important thing was that their mission had been accomplished. The Kumo ninja might analyze the pills she had offered the target and would find that they were really just regular sleeping pills. The Jounin had a good idea, but he had acted too late. The diversion had worked so well that by the time he had realized she might not be who she said, she had already pricked Fujita's skin with a poison needle. The fat merchant hadn't even noticed. Now it was just a matter of time before the substance took effect. She would have preferred to stay and make sure, but because the Kyumo ninja might catch on, she and her teammates agreed that it would be much better if they were long gone by then. With that thought, she slipped out of the pine tree and quietly, heading for where her teammates were waiting, ready to back her up in case something went wrong. Soon they left Toyoke behind. They'll confirm Fujita's demise later. Next morning the sun was already up and they were already packed and ready to set out. But their client was still asleep. When is he going to wake up? Nuki whined. If he didn't get enough sleep that night, he saw no reason why anyone else should. He'll wake up when he'll wake up, I snapped. He had a nasty shock, so let him sleep. But if he doesn't wake up soon, we won't make it to the next town before evening, you pointed out. He'd much rather sleep in a hotel than on the ground. We obey the wishes of our client, Kay reminded them a bit more harshly than the situation warranted. He was getting a bit worried too. Their client was sleeping too long and too deep. In fact, he quickly strode towards the bed and examined the person lying there. His worst fears were quickly confirmed. Fujita. Yukito was dead. He said a word that would make sailors blush. His genin didn't blush only because they had no idea what did it mean, but the tone of his voice informed them that something was very wrong. What's wrong? You asked. He's dead, the jounin informed them. It was the doctor. Nuki exclaimed. We should have given him the pills. AI wailed. Now his heart gave out. We failed another mission, you stated flatly. That stopped his teammates dead in their tracks. Not again, Nuki groaned. We have to catch his assassin. AI suggested, abandoning the theory of natural causes of death. Maybe he really died of heart attack, Kay said. He couldn't see any signs of poison on the corpse, but that could mean only that the poison used was one only a medical specialist would recognize, and Kay wasn't one of those. And at first glance, everything did seem perfectly natural. He wasn't convinced about this theory, but he knew that trying to catch a probably high-level enemy ninja while dragging 3 clumsy genin behind him was a lost cause. There was really nothing left to do than return to Kyumo and report a mission failed. Again. He sighed. He so wasn't looking forward to this. Mission room. It took several months before Team Tenzo was assigned a noteworthy mission again. At first, it didn't look as such. All 4 members of Team Tenzo were standing in the mission room, waiting for the Chunin on duty to assign them one of the scrolls and whatever mission was described inside. The Chunin leafed through the mission requests idly before picking one scroll and handing it to Tenzo. Naruto noticed that it was labeled B. Tenzo unrolled it and scanned over its contents. So what is it? Hataru asked impatiently. We're going to search for a genin team that didn't report back from their mission, the jounin informed them. Naruto, knowing him as long as he did, noticed a slight flinch. What is it? He asked. Instead of an answer, the former ANBU handed the scroll to Hana. The Inuzuka heiress read a few lines before gasping in shock. What's wrong? Hataru inquired. It's my brother's team. Konoha Gate's Hana was marching back and forth, waiting impatiently for whenever her slowpoke teammates would finally bother to show up. Her dogs picked up on her mood and growled and snarled at everybody who came nearby. Finally, after what felt like several hours to her, they arrived. What took you so long? She barked. We're early, Hataru answered. What's your problem? You're too slow, the Inuzuka insisted. Don't be impatient, Hana, Tenzo chastised her. We said to meet in an hour and it hadn't passed yet. I know it's your brother in danger, but being rash and irrational won't help him. That's easy to say for you, Hana grumbled. It isn't your brother who might be even now being tortured and killed by enemy ninja. Don't be so dramatic, the purple-haired Kunoichi tried to calm her down. Considering where they were headed, the chance of encountering the enemy is low. But it isn't zero, the dog mistress insisted. They went northeast, that's towards the battlefields. But they stayed close to Konoha, Tenzo reminded her. That area is regularly patrolled, so it's safe. But something happened to them, the Inuzuka pointed out. They wouldn't just get lost on a simple search and rescue mission. Maybe they need rescuing from whatever happened to the original travelers, Naruto suggested. Stop the joking, Tiny, Hana glared at her youngest teammate. They're ninja, Hataru pointed out. They should be able to take care of themselves. But a lot of things can go wrong, the Inuzuka reminded them. Remember what happened on our first search and rescue mission together. Naruto winced when he remembered his fall. His first C rank sure wasn't a high point of his ninja career. Maybe they just got delayed and were worrying over nothing, Hataru tried to ease their worries. Maybe, Hana sighed. Or maybe they're in real trouble. This conversation isn't going to solve anything, the Jounin stated. We won't find out until we get there. Then what are we waiting for? The team headed out, with Hana setting a fast pace. Underground prison Hinata sat on the ground quietly. It wasn't like she could do anything else, considering that she was bound. She had tried to undo the knots, but after several hours of useless fumbling she concluded that whoever had bound her had really known what they were doing. The ropes didn't give a bit. Or maybe she was just so bad at escape techniques. Though she had done well at the academy, it obviously wasn't good enough for real life. She was just a failure. Maybe if she wasn't, they wouldn't be in this situation now. She closed her eyes, remembering how did she end up in her current predicament. She had been happy when she had graduated from the academy. Not that she had been really looking forward to being a ninja, but because she had feared the consequences of failure more. So this way her father hadn't chastised her much, only pointing out that her scores and class ranking should have been much better. Hinata had accepted his critique quietly. Then she was assigned to a team. She was happy with her teammates. Aburame Shino was quiet, which suited her just fine. He was also strong and smart, which gave her confidence that her team would do well. She wasn't even freaked out by his bugs. Much. She was still getting used to them. Inuzuka Kiba was his exact opposite. Loud and boisterous, but a really nice guy underneath. And he was a decent ninja too. And she really liked their Jounin sensei. She had met Yuhi Kurenai before and the woman had always been nice to her. She was even so nice that she had asked her father whether he was okay with sending the clan heiress into the field, especially now, during wartime. Overhearing his answer hadn't been so nice. Hinata grimaced when she remembered it. Hayashi had never before said that he didn't care whether she lived or died in so many words. And then came their first C-rank mission. She had been so scared, but Kurenai-sensei had assured them that they wouldn't be doing any fighting. They weren't even going anywhere near the front lines. They were just supposed to search for a group of travelers who got lost in the woods. As a specialized tracker team, they should have no problem with it. At least that was the theory. The reality had been quite different. At first everything had seemed alright. They had consulted their clients in the village and found the trail easily using their directions and followed it into the wilderness. It was so obvious that they could follow it with their eyes closed. Then they were attacked. Hinata didn't understand how they could have been blindsided so completely. They had the Kikaichu bugs, an Inuzuka dog and her Byakugan to warn them about danger. Yet they had no clue that the enemy had been lying in wait until the trap was sprung. Hinata couldn't help but consider it her failure. If she had used her Byakugan, which she didn't because she had been too tired and had to conserve her chakra, they wouldn't have walked into the ambush. If she hadn't been so weak that she couldn't even use her only asset, her teammates wouldn't have been defeated and captured. The sound of a door opening brought her out of her musings. She raised her head to see two people approaching her cell. First was a blue-haired woman in a green kimono adorned with camellias. She carried herself confidently, with an air of authority. Hinata concluded that she must be somebody important, maybe even the commander of this base. But it was the man walking behind her that made her breath catch in her throat. He didn't look particularly intimidating, despite the fact that he was obviously a powerful ninja. But with his light hair, dark eyes, and slight smile he looked like an easygoing person. It was the flak jacket and Hitai he was wearing that made Hinata's blood run cold. She'd recognize them anywhere. Kyumo. So that's her? He asked, studying her intently. Yes, the woman answered. A main family Hyuga, just as we promised. Now it's your turn to deliver your part of the bargain, Shii. Don't worry, Giran-san, Shii answered. Kyumo stands true to its word. You'd better do, Giran replied. If you didn't, Orochimaru-sama would find some use for her. I said you don't have to worry. Reikage-sama would personally see to it that you get your payment. He'll be pleased with your work. He'd better be. I lost some good men there. Then the duo left and Hinata remained alone in her cell with her fear. Her worst nightmare had just come true. She was going to be sent to Kyumo to have her eyes taken and be forced to bear children for them for the rest of her life. She had been explained what was in store for her in case of captivity shortly after the last time Kyumo had attempted to kidnap her. Back then her father had saved her. Now she didn't count on it. He didn't care about her, though he probably cared about the Byakugan falling into the enemy hands. But she didn't count on being rescued anyway. She sighed. It was all in vain. She was going to be taken to Kyumo. Uncle Hizashi's death would become meaningless. She could barely remember him anymore, but she knew he had been a great man. His sacrifice should have meaning, but it wouldn't because of her. Because she had been weak enough to get captured. And because of her the whole teammate had been targeted and now they were in captivity too. They weren't meant to be sent to Kyumo, at least the Cloud Ninja didn't show any interest in them, so they were probably going to stay in Orochimaru's care. That was probably even worse. She had heard horror stories about the Snake Sanin's research. And now her teammates would become his new victims and it was all her fault. She couldn't take it anymore. She slumped to the ground and cried. Wilderness. The trail was old and faint. They had found it easily enough after consulting the villagers and teammates' original clients, but they had learned only that the Genin team had been there and left after the missing travelers. But that was the moment the mission stopped being easy. The trail was barely there. Yesterday's rain had almost washed it away. But there was still enough left of it for the keen noses of the Inuzuka hounds to follow it. Yet despite the best efforts of the Himura triplets they were going slow, having to backtrack several times when the trail disappeared for 100 paces and they had to search to pick it up again. And the trail was getting fainter and fainter as the time since Team 8 had passed through here increased. Hana squashed her urge to panic. The thought that if they wouldn't make some sort of breakthrough soon, they'd lose the last traces of her brother was just too terrible to bear. Yet no matter what she did to keep calm, she couldn't help imagining that the next time they'd lose the trail they won't be able to find it again. It was getting harder and harder every time. She almost screamed in frustration as the Himura lifted their noses from the ground, suggesting that they'd lost the scent once again. But then she realized that they were sniffing something. What was it? She sniffled the air too. Her nose was almost as good as her dog's, so she caught a very faint scent. What was it? It was familiar, but she couldn't tell more. Then the wind blew and carried more of the scent. Now it was strong enough to recognize it, though just barely. She laughed while her canine partners barked happily and then all four of them ran towards the source of the scent. What did you find? Hataru shouted after them. Hana didn't answer. She was too busy racing forward. Her teammates just sighed and chased after them. Soon she could hear it as well as smell it. Quiet barking and whining. Finding its source didn't take long after that. There. Under a bush laid a small white puppy. Akamaru, she exclaimed. Where's Kiba? The dog whined in answer. You don't know? She asked in dismay. She had hoped she'd find her brother close to her dog, but it seemed that it wasn't going to be. Then the puppy filled her in on all he knew. Unfortunately, it wasn't much. Is that all? She demanded. Akamaru whined in shame. The puppy eyes he gave her made her realize just how young he was. I'm sorry, she apologized. Are you hurt? Then she realized how stupid the question was and immediately activated her medical jutsu. By that time the rest of her team arrived. What's going on? Tenzo demanded. Puppy! Naruto exclaimed. Quiet, Hataru chastised him. That's Akamaru, Hana introduced him. He's Kiba's partner. So where's Kiba? Akamaru doesn't know, the brown-haired kunoichi sighed. They'd been following the trail without trouble when they were suddenly attacked. There was no warning. Akamaru was kicked at the beginning of the fight, so he doesn't know what happened after then. Just that when he woke up everybody was gone, and when he tried to follow the trail, he lost it. Who attacked them? Tenzo inquired. Akamaru doesn't know either, the dog mistress sighed. Aren't Inuzuka dogs supposed to be smart? Hataru questioned. Akamaru is just a baby, Hana explained. He shouldn't be used in the field yet. But he's Kiba's partner and they were partnered just as the war started. There was no helping it. So what are we going to do now? Now Akamaru will take us to the site of the ambush. Underground prison. He was tied up and locked inside a cell, but he wasn't helpless. His captors hadn't sealed his chakra, and even if they had, they couldn't remove his Kikaichu. No Aburame was truly defenseless as long as he had his bugs. It was a fact Shino meant to take full advantage of. He knew he had to be very careful. If their captors realized what he was doing, they would make sure to prevent him from trying it again. They might even kill him. And Shino didn't want to die. Though maybe compared to what he had heard could happen to captives during wartime, quick death didn't sound so bad. But if he was dead, he couldn't help his comrades. Though they hadn't been a team for a long time, they had been classmates for years and he really cared about them. But getting emotional was pointless. Shino knew he had to keep a level head if he wanted to get out of here. Being always calm and logical was crucial, such was the philosophy of the Aburame clan. Unfortunately, logic was telling him that their chances of getting out of here were negligible. His teammates were bound and locked up inside cells too. That rendered them helpless. He had no idea what had happened to Kurenai-sensei. He hadn't seen the Jounin since the battle and had no idea whether she was alive or dead. They were vastly outnumbered by superior enemies and they couldn't count on being rescued either. Their attackers were very adept at covering their tracks, as proven by their successful ambush. Shino forbade himself such thoughts and concentrated on calming down his restless hive. It wouldn't do if the Kikaichu's buzzing gave his advantage away. During the battle he had been knocked out so fast he had no opportunity to use them, so it was quite possible that their captors didn't realize he had them. He had to keep calm and find a way to gain at least something from this unfavorable situation. But what? He didn't know. When you don't know, gather more information, a memory of his father's lecture advised him. Shino decided that it was a good advice. He needed to find out more. And finding out information was exactly what the Kikaichu were good at. He'd just have to be careful that no one would spot them. If he managed to place some on the guards, they would take them all around the base. If they were lucky, some of the bugs might even get out. And if they were found by another member of the Aburame clan, they would relay their findings to them, thus enabling Konoha to deal with this threat. Yes, that sounded like a plan. With that thought, Shino concentrated on implementing it. Ambush Site 1 look was all Team Tenzo needed to tell that a battle had taken place here. Though somebody had taken the care to collect all the used kunai and shuriken, the telltale holes in the surrounding trees remained. There also was a large chunk of the soil overturned, probably by a Doton jutsu. And then there was a stain on the grass that looked like blood. Hoof! Akamaru barked. He says it happened here, Hana translated, as if her teammates couldn't see. There are no bodies, Hataru observed. Hopefully they're still alive, Naruto speculated. Or they just took their bodies for examination, Tenzo outlined another possibility. The change in Hana's demeanor was immediate. You really didn't have to say that, Naruto muttered. I did, the Jounin disagreed. A ninja has to keep a realistic outlook on the situation during a mission. Clinging to false hopes would only get us in trouble. Kiba is still alive, the Inuzuka growled. You can't be certain, Tenzo countered. I am, the Kunoichi said at the same time as Akamaru barked. You hear this? Akamaru would know if Kiba was dead. How? This is how it is between us and our dogs. Akamaru would have known if Kiba had died. I hope it isn't just your wishful thinking, the former ANBU muttered. It is not, Hana assured him. After that they proceeded to comb the area for clues. Underground base, when do you plan to leave? Guren asked her companion. Tomorrow, Shia answered. Why not today, the woman inquired. While the Kyumo group had behaved themselves for the 2 weeks they had spent here, she didn't like having foreign ninja in a facility that belonged to her master. The possibility of some treachery was always there. Our forces will provide a distraction so we can slip through Konoha's lines. Unhindered, the Cloud Jounin explained. The area around this base is clean, Guren informed him. Our scouting team confirmed it. But did they confirm that the whole road to Kyumo is clear? Shii countered. You should be able to avoid some Konoha patrols, Guren said dismissively, brushing her kimono absent-mindedly. Something stuck to her fingers. She almost threw it away, but out of some curiosity she looked at whatever had dared to stain her clothes. It was a bug. She narrowed her eyes. A bug here wasn't good. There weren't many experiments going on inside this base, but that didn't mean that those that weren't important, at least in her mind. And if a bug could get here, who knows what else could contaminate them. Orochimaru-sama would be very displeased if his research got ruined or just delayed. And she lived for Orochimaru-sama's pleasure. She took a closer look at the insect. It looked a bit familiar. Maybe she had studied a bit about it. But she wasn't an entomologist. But in the end the species of the bug wasn't important. She'd just squash it and have the base disinfected. Then everything will be all right again. Is that a Kikaichu? Shii asked worriedly. What? Guren snapped. It looks like the bugs the Aburame clan of Konoha use, the Kyumo Jounin explained. I've fought them before so I know. Damn it, the Oto Kunoichi swore, thinking about the implications. Did they find us? And you assured me the area around the base is clean, Shii said in an accusatory tone. Guren understood his annoyance. If Konoha discovered them, it would be bad. But maybe, she narrowed her eyes. She had paid little attention to the captives aside the Hyuga, but now that she thought about it, there was one boy. She headed towards the prison cells without a word. Where are you going? Shii questioned. To check something, she answered curtly. The Cloud Shinobi just sighed and followed her. Soon they reached the underground cells. Guren threw the door open, not caring about the startled exclamations of the guards. Then she marched towards the cell holding the genin with high-collared coat and dark glasses. She threw its door open too and lifted the boy from the ground before unzipping his coat. Sure enough, the insects crawling all over his body were revealed. "So you are an Aburame," she spat. Shino paled. He realized that the game was up. He didn't know what she was going to do to him, but he knew it wasn't going to be pleasant. But he had no intention to just sit down and take it. He commanded his hive to attack. Guren suddenly found herself covered in bugs. It was gross. She screamed. Then the Kikaichu began biting her and draining her chakra. That helped her get over her disgust. She concentrated her chakra and turned everything touching her into crystal. The Aburame insects were encased in small purple stones and fell to the ground where they shattered. Shino watched it in dismay. That had been a large part of his hive that had just died. Guren stood up and walked out of the cell. "Stun him and seal his chakra," she commanded. "And don't let him regain consciousness again. We don't want him to repeat this trick again." The guards hurried to obey her. "It was just a little kid trying his stupid tricks," she stated. "It seems so," Shii replied, but he didn't sound completely assured. "Do you still want to leave tomorrow?" "Yes," he sighed. He didn't like staying in a location that might be compromised, but unfortunately the decision wasn't his. "We have to wait for the diversion group." The forest they had examined the ambush site thoroughly. They got whatever information they could out of it. Unfortunately, that wasn't much. The battle had been short and very few techniques were used. And those the team could identify weren't specific to any village nor any clan. The attackers could have been from anywhere. But it wasn't a complete waste of time. The Himera triplets had picked up some faint sense that belonged to the attackers. They also found a trail leading away from the scene. They followed it as far as they could, but it disappeared after a while. Why did they have to remember to wipe their tracks now? Hana whined. She was about ready to tear her hair out in frustration. Akamaru huddled mournfully in her arms. She patted his back absent-mindedly. "It would be too easy if they didn't remember at all," Naruto replied. "Enough with your stupid jokes, Tiny," the dog mistress barked. "Hey, I wasn't even joking," the boy defended. "Enough with the bickering," Tenzo chastised them. "We have a trail to find." "Yes, let's go," Hana agreed, urging her dogs forward. "We don't know if they went there," the Jounin pointed out. The Inuzuka paused. She nearly kicked herself for falling for the oldest trick in the book when it came to confusing potential pursuers. It was very likely that the attackers had changed directions the moment they had wiped the trail. It was a trick an academy student could fall for, but a seasoned chunin like her really shouldn't. "You're right," she sighed, all the time cursing her stupidity. She really had to get a grip. She won't be any help to Kiba in her current state, and she might even waste their only chance to find her brother and his team. "We'll fan out and look for clues," Tenzo decided. The three chunin nodded. They searched for a long time. Everybody was doing their best to spot any trace of a group of shinobi passing there. Naruto found a broken twig, but closer examination revealed that it had been stepped on by a deer, not a human. Hataru had found some suspicious scratches on a tree trunk, but that too turned out to be the work of a deer. It made Naruto speculate whether there was a conspiracy of deer trying to make their job harder, which caused Hana to snap at him and Tenzo had to play peacemaker. Finally, it was Hana who actually found something useful. When she announced she had found a bug, her teammates were ready to call it another false alarm. But the dog mistress was sure that this time she had a real clue. "It's a Kikaichu," she explained, showing the insect to the rest of her team. "You can tell?" Hataru questioned. "Bugs look all the same to me." "I'm positive. The Inuzuka clan often cooperates with the Aburame, so I've seen them before plenty of times." It is indeed an Aburame bug, Tenzo confirmed. But it looks weak, as if it hasn't fed on chakra for a long time. You're right, Hana agreed. She knew enough about animals to be able to tell when they were starved or distraught. It must be Kiba's teammates, she knows. That's just speculation, Hataru pointed out. How many Aburame do you think are around here? Naruto asked. It's the best guess we have, Tenzo said. It keeps crawling that way, Hana pointed after observing the Kikaichu's behavior for a while. Either it senses something interesting or it wants us to go there. Just how smart is one bug? Naruto questioned. I don't know, Hana shrugged. It's the only clue we have, Tenzo summed up their situation. Then we have to follow it. They took off where the bug led them. Prison cell Kiba was feeling useless. When they had been first assigned this mission, he had been happy because it had looked like his opportunity to shine. Tracking was his clan's specialty. So after they talked with the clients in the village, they picked the trail easily. He and Akamaru took point and led their teammates to what he thought would be their first success. Oh, how wrong he had been. The noses he and Akamaru were so proud of proved to be absolutely useless. There had been no warning before the trap sprung. One moment they were following the clear trail and the next there were enemy ninja raining from the trees. Akamaru growled and bit one man in the leg. The man just yelled angrily and kicked the puppy so hard he flew into a nearby tree, where he slumped down. That made Kiba snap. He attacked the man with a tsuga so fast he forgot to perform the beast imitation technique first. It was completely useless. The sound ninja dodged and then Kiba had only a faint recollection of sharp pain in his cranium. He awoke inside a cell, his arms and legs bound. He could see Hinata in the cell across his and he could hear Shino in the one next to his. He had no idea where Kurenai-sensei was. He hoped she wasn't dead. He hoped Akamaru wasn't dead. But considering the last sight he had of him, that was a definite possibility. But he would have known if his partner was dead, wouldn't he? He wasn't so sure. Another thing that bothered him was how helpless he was. Shino at least had tried something, even if it failed in the end. But he could only lie down helplessly. Maybe he could try chewing through his bonds when the guards weren't looking? It sounded like a stupid idea even to him. The ropes looked strong and he couldn't reach them with his teeth well, but at least it would give him something to occupy his time. Outside the base, it looks like it's here, Hana said. The behavior of the Kikaichu bug suggested that they had reached their destination. Akamaru barked and sniffed around. I can't see anything, Naruto stated looking at the surrounding foliage. Of course it's camouflaged, Hataru said. I know that, the boy replied. Considering how well the culprits had erased their trail, it was obvious that they would conceal their hideout as well. But that doesn't help us if we can't find the entrance. It should be right here, the Inuzuka said after observing the bug some more. Right here, but where? Naruto muttered looking around. Tenzo meanwhile examined the ground around them. He used his Mokuton techniques to scan underground. If he concentrated, he could feel the roots underground and make them move. It didn't take him long to determine that there was an area they couldn't reach. We're standing on it, he announced. What? Naruto and Hataru exclaimed in unison, looking under their feet. All they could see was a perfectly ordinary patch of grass. That's some good camouflage, Hana remarked, impressed despite herself. It is, the Jounin agreed. Let's go inside, the Inuzuka said. Akamaru in her arms barked sharply in agreement. Should we really? Hataru wondered. We don't know how many enemies are inside. And it's probably trapped. Akamaru yapped furiously. Hana scratched his back. We're not leaving Kiba there, she declared forcefully. While it would be better if there were more of us, Konoha's short on manpower so we can't call for reinforcements, Tenzo analyzed the situation. We have to manage. Alright, Hataru sighed. But I still wish we had backup. We'll manage, Naruto reassured her. Now step back, Tenzo ordered. The three Chunin did so. Tenzo made a few hand seals and removed the soil from the entrance with an earth jutsu. A reinforced door was revealed. How are we going to get in? Blow it up, Hana suggested. That could collapse the corridor, Hataru pointed out. Do you have a better idea? The dog mistress inquired. Pick the lock, the purple-haired Kunoichi suggested. It's probably trapped, Tenzo said. Speaking of which, why didn't we see any traps earlier? Naruto questioned. These people are pretending they aren't even here, the Jounin analyzed the situation. If somebody accidentally sprung a trap in this area, a thorough search would follow and they don't want that, so they banked on stealth instead. We had trouble finding the entrance even when we knew where it was. That's true, Hana agreed. So how are we going to go about the door? Fast, Hataru answered. They must know we're here now. Maybe they'll come out to attack us, Naruto mused. Or maybe they'll run through a back door and we won't see them ever again, the Uzuki girl supplied. We're blowing the door up now. Hana growled. She already reached into her pocket. For exploding tags. Wait. Tenzo stopped her before she could use them. If the entrance collapses, we won't get inside. We can't just stand here, the Inuzuka insisted. The thought of having her brother so close now yet being unable to help him was driving her mad. I think I can destroy the lock with the Rasengan, Naruto said after studying the door for a while. Then what are you waiting for? Hana barked. Try it, Tenzo said. Naruto nodded and formed the spinning ball of chakra in his right palm. Doing it with only one hand wasn't a problem for him anymore. Well, most of the time. And this time he could concentrate in peace, so the chakra sphere that slammed into the lock was almost perfect. It took just a few seconds before the lock gave and the door swung open. We're in, the boy cheered. Hana almost charged inside, but Tenzo stopped her. No recklessness, he chastised her. We're doing this like seasoned ninja, not academy students. The Inuzuka didn't like it, but she understood why caution was important. Stay here and hide, she ordered Akamaru, who was growling at the dark tunnel, trying to look tough. The puppy looked like he wanted to argue, but then he crawled into the bushes. Then the team slowly entered the enemy hideout. Base Command Center, Guren-sama. Guren-sama, the Oto Chunin shouted as he ran through the door. What is it? She barked as she lifted her head from the scroll she had been studying. Intruders, he shouted breathlessly. They broke through the southern entrance. What? She jumped to her feet. This wasn't good. And just when she thought that everything was going fine. Where? How many? South Entrance, the Chunin reported. It's one team. Who are they? Konoha, probably. Guren swore. So the blasted tree huggers had found them. One team wasn't much, but it was still one team too many. If by some miracle they managed to rescue the captives, the deal with Kyumo would be off and Orochimaru would be displeased with her. Scratch it, he was going to be displeased anyway. This base was compromised and would have to be scrapped, including everything inside. But maybe she could get Orochimaru into a more pleasant mood if the attacking team that shouldn't be too hard to defeat would provide some interesting research material. And then an idea hit her. Yes, if she could pull it off, Orochimaru-sama would praise her. Send our forces to stop them, she commanded. And call the Curse Seal Squad to me. Base entrance Naruto's clones took the point. They walked through the corridor carefully, alert for any possible trap. So far there was none. It was suspicious. Why wasn't there at least a guard at the entrance? Were their enemies really so careless, or was there an ambush waiting inside? Then suddenly the corridor opened into a large underground room. The moment the clones walked inside, they were hit by a rain of Sanban. Only one managed to dodge, but he was immediately dispelled by a blast of chakra-charged sound. The initial exchange let the Konoha team know where their enemies were hiding. Getsuga! Hana shouted as she and the Himura triplets charged at the pair of ninja who had thrown the Sanban. Naruto fired an air bullet at the sound user. Tenzo quickly used the tree-binding technique on the one ninja who had dodged the Inuzuka's charge. Hataru spotted another enemy preparing to attack and cast a genjutsu on him, which made him think that there were spiders crawling all over him. Even as he screamed in disgust and tried to brush off the non-existent arachnids, she hit him with a kunai to the neck. Then the battle started in earnest. The Konoha team noted the headbands of their opponents. Oto. So they were Orochimaru's people. It was really worrying that the traitor could build a base so close to Konoha without anybody being the wiser. The security around these parts must have been slipping. But they couldn't ponder about it for long. Soon more enemies poured into the room and they were too busy fighting to concentrate on anything else. The team tried to stay together as a unit, but it worked only for so long. Then a monster resembling a horned bipedal lizard rushed into the room and jumped right in the middle of them. The team scattered to avoid it. Then they were immediately attacked by the sound ninja and separated further. Naruto quickly created a dozen Kage Bunshin and sent them to attack. Unfortunately, they were almost immediately dispelled by a high-pressure air blast from one of the sound ninja. The technique hit even Naruto and made him stumble. The only good thing about it was that the attacker had downed one of his comrades as well. Naruto quickly recovered and threw a kunai with an exploding tag at the man. Before it hit, he was attacked by an Oto Kunoichi. She was good. She managed to kick his feet from under him and then knelt on him, pinning him down as he fell. Unfortunately for her, she had never before encountered a skilled wind specialist. Naruto just concentrated wind chakra to his forearms, cutting her hands. She let go of them with a startled yell. The boy then fully activated the whirlwind fist and punched her in the stomach. His fist drilled through her shirt and skin easily. She collapsed down, out of the fight. Naruto jumped up and barely dodged a tackle from a heavy-set man. That brought him straight into the path of a pair of shuriken. Fortunately, both of them were stopped by his flak jacket. He turned towards the person who had thrown them just to see him unleashing another bunch of throwing stars. Naruto quickly flashed through seals. Futon, Ripushu. The pressured air knocked the projectiles away and ruffled the thrower's hair. Just when Naruto was about to follow up with another attack, he heard the heavy footsteps of the big man rushing to attack him again. He turned around to deal with it. He didn't need to. The man was suddenly blown away by an exploding note that had been stuck to his back. Naruto blinked in surprise. Who had done it? His question was answered shortly because as the corpse fell, it revealed Hana standing behind it. "You're all right?" the kunoichi asked. "Yes," Naruto answered, throwing a kunai at a sound ninja's unprotected back. "We have to regroup," the Inuzuka stated. "Easier said than done," the boy grimaced, pointing at the many enemies separating them from the rest of their team. And considering that Tenzo had his hands full with the cursed seal lizard beast and Hataru was fending off two enemies at once, it was unlikely that their teammates would reach them. "We can't stay like this," the girl pointed out. Naruto nodded. In the big hall, the Oto Shinobi could use their numbers to their advantage. He looked around for a way to change it. And spotted it almost immediately. "Into the tunnel," he shouted. Hana nodded. Setting up defense in the narrow corridor seemed like their best option. They quickly dashed into the hallway. Their first clue that it maybe wasn't a good idea was when the Oto Shinobi didn't pursue them. The two Konoha Chunin stopped and turned around, expecting some kind of attack. It came from a completely different direction than they were prepared for. The floor under their feet suddenly opened and they found themselves falling. Base entrance hall. Hataru was on the defensive. It was a position she didn't like being in, but it wasn't like she had a choice. She was fighting two opponents at once and neither of them was a slouch. It was all she could do to fend off their attacks. And she could see two more sound ninja running towards her. It wasn't good. If they reached when she was tied up fighting her two current opponents, they'd kill them easily. She jumped back to gain some distance. It didn't work as well as she hoped it would. One of the ninja followed her. The other stayed behind and clasped his hands together in a series of hand seals. But it was better than nothing. Now Hataru didn't have to concentrate on defense so much, she had the time to charge her Kodachi with lightning chakra and then release it in one strong pulse. Her opponent screamed as she electrocuted him. She gave him no time to recover and promptly stabbed her sword into his chest. One enemy dealt with, she turned towards the two approaching her. She tightened the grip on her sword handle as she realized they were almost upon her. Then a jet of water slammed into her, cast by one of her original opponents she had almost forgotten about. Hataru landed hard on the ground near one of the tunnel entrances. She picked herself up, meaning to sneak through the battlefield back to Tenzo and guard his back. But just as she got to her feet, she saw two Oto shinobi, probably of Jounin rank, running towards her. One of them was performing hand seals. Hataru had no idea what kind of jutsu he wanted to cast, but she had no intention to find out the hard way. She ducked into the tunnel. She was just in time to avoid being hit with a cloud of grayish-green something. She'd bet a C-rank pay that it was poison. I can't get through that, she thought. Then she spotted a dark shape inside the cloud, suggesting that at least the caster could move inside. And the greenish mist was slowly gloating towards her. Hataru took a few steps back and reached into her pouch for a kunai with an explosive note. She threw it just as the enemy ninja was coming out of the cloud. He batted the projectile aside, but he failed to deactivate the tag. It went off right behind his back. He was thrown forward, where Hataru quickly finished him off with a swipe of her kodachi. Unfortunately, the sound shinobi wasn't the only casualty of the blast. The entrance of the tunnel collapsed. Hataru looked in dismay at the colorful rubble. There was no way she'd be getting through there to rejoin her team now. Who builds such a shoddy base, she thought. What is that stuff anyway? Glass? She decided that it didn't matter. She'd just have to remember to be extra cautious not to bring the ceiling down on her head. The question was what she should do now. The answer wasn't difficult. If she couldn't go back, she had to head forward. There will be enough enemies for her to fight no matter where she went. With that thought she started down the corridor. Back in the entrance hall, Tenzo sighed in relief as the wooden beams snapped the monster lizard's neck and it reverted into an Oto kunoichi. This had been harder than it should have been. Not only was the cursed seal warrior tough, but she wasn't alone. Killing her while dodging the attacks of her comrades was pushing his abilities, but he somehow managed. But now he wasn't so preoccupied fighting, he noticed that he was alone in the room. Well, not counting the enemies. There were 4 sound ninja in fighting condition. But they weren't much of a threat, as neither of them was Jounin level. The former ANBU could deal with them easily. The problem was that all of his students were missing. He had lost track of them during the battle and now he had no idea what had happened to them. Had they been killed? He couldn't see their bodies anywhere and he doubted the Oto ninja would bother to drag them away while the battle was still underway. That meant that his students had left the room on their own volition. But where did they go? There were 4 tunnels they could have taken. Tenzo quickly took out the remaining enemies and then explored the surroundings a bit. He found out that one of the corridors had partially caved in and another contained a pit trap. That was probably how his students had left the room. He could follow them, but they were all accomplished ninja. He was almost sure that they'd be able to deal with whatever the denizens of this base might throw at them. And the fact that they had separated meant that they could search this underground lair faster. With that thought he headed for one of the remaining tunnels. Base. Command Center SHII brought the whole Kyumo squad when he stormed into the command center. Guren wondered whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. She eventually decided that it was good. "It looks like your base wasn't as well hidden as you assured us," he accused. "It's just a small problem," she said dismissively. "Just one team. Our forces are going to crush them in no time." "Better make good of your promise," the Cloud Jounin growled. "I hope the Hyuga is under strict guard." "Of course she is. The Konoha team won't get anywhere near there." "I'll better make sure of it," Shii said, turning to lead his subordinates towards the prison block. The moment their backs were turned, Guren formed a few hand seals and released her technique. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Shii shouted angrily as he dodged the sudden barrage of crystal Sanban. His comrades weren't so lucky. One had been caught completely off guard and now resembled a pincushion, the other hadn't ducked fast enough and now had a crystal spike going through his lung. Shii's medical knowledge told him that it was fatal. Only one other member of his team was still in fighting condition. "What does it look like?" Guren shrugged, her fingers already going through seals for another jutsu. "Orochimaru-sama wasn't getting enough from this deal, so I thought, what if I killed you, blamed it on Konoha and brought Orochimaru-sama all the captives? He has interest in the Byakugan, so he'd reward me." Technically speaking, Orochimaru wanted the Sharingan, but Byakugan was close enough, wasn't it? At least in Guren's mind it was. "The Raikage won't let it slide," he pointed out. "Well, then I just have to make sure nobody tells him," the woman retorted. Shii didn't argue with her logic. He could see that their deal was off. He jumped high to evade the crystals suddenly growing from the ground and released the technique he had prepared during Guren's speech. Raigen Reikuchu. The illusion of a lightning pillar blinded the woman momentarily. Shii's last surviving comrade immediately sprung forward to take advantage of it. But before he could score a hit, he was stopped. A monster had entered the room and protected Guren. A Curse Seal warrior, Shii recognized. One of them wasn't a big deal. The three that followed him made it a big deal. This is going to be tough, he thought. Pit Trap Naruto, Hana and her 3 dogs didn't fall for long before they landed. They found themselves in complete darkness before the door had closed after them. "Where are we?" Naruto asked. Hana concentrated her fire chakra into her palm and illuminated the space. It was a small, plain room with steel walls. As soon as they took it all in, slots opened in one of the walls and a hail of Sanban flew out. The Konoha group avoided them by dropping to the ground. "Screw it," Naruto growled and formed a Rasengan. He slammed his into the floor, as that was the only surface that wasn't steel. The boy was surprised as how easily the floor shattered. "Watch out!" Hana shouted before the floor gave under them completely and they plummeted downwards. They landed hard in a perfectly ordinary-looking hallway. Hana and Naruto picked themselves from the rubble, brushing off the dust from their clothes. The younger Chunin looked up at the hole in the ceiling. It was quite high up and it would be hard to get back there. It was a wonder they weren't seriously hurt in the fall. But he felt no need to climb up there, feeling confident that Tenzo and Hataru could take care of themselves. "What did they make this base of?" the boy grumbled. "Glass? It doesn't look like glass," the Inuzuka said as she pulled one of the red shards from one of her dog's coat. "It actually looks like some precious stone. Who'd build a base out of that?" Naruto wondered. "Who could afford it?" The Haimaru triplets growled. "We have other worries coming our way," the Kunoichi translated. Naruto immediately slipped into a fighting stance. Hana did the same. A second later a sound ninja appeared from behind a corner. Just one? Naruto smirked, activating his whirlwind fist. That's going to be easy, the dog mistress grumbled. Naruto charged. The Oto Shinobi was good. He dodged the Chunin's attack even in the narrow corridor. But he had no way to dodge the Getsuga of the Inuzuka quartet. He was out of commission in 2 seconds flat. Too easy, Hana commented once she stopped spinning. So where now? Naruto asked. They were close to an intersection. Let me see, the Inuzuka muttered as she and her companions sniffed the air. I have a good feeling about this one, she pointed to the right. Then let's go. Command Center. The fight had been going for quite a long time now. Shii and his partner had killed all the curse seal monsters, but Shii's partner didn't survive it. It was only him and Guren now. And he was wounded and tired. The woman was breathing hard too, but she had no serious wound. He might have the elemental advantage against her, but in his current state it was doing him little good. Things were looking bleak for the Kyumo ninja. That was when somebody appeared in the doorway. Shii didn't know whether to be happy or curse when the Leaf Jounin entered the room. On one hand it meant that his time for defeating Guren was up. On the other it meant that Guren's time for defeating him was up too. And considering the wounds on his body, this fight had been going Guren's way. But no longer. Shii watched as she turned to face the Konoha ninja who spat several water bullets at her. She jumped out of the way, but it was a slow movement betraying just how injured and tired she was. Now Shii had the perfect chance to take her out, but then he'd have to face the uninjured and fresh Konoha Jounin. It wasn't something he wanted to do in his current state. No, this was the time to cut his losses and report this fiasco to the Raikage. With the thought he put his escape plan into motion. Raijin Reikuchu, he shouted. To his opponents it looked like a huge pillar of lightning just appeared between them and blinded them with their light. They both yelped in surprise and pain. Shii waited for nothing and sprinted for the door as fast as his injured body allowed him. His path brought him uncomfortably close to the Leaf Ninja and the man hurled a handful of shuriken at him. Fortunately for Shii he still couldn't see properly and only one of the shuriken got stuck in his flak jacket. Then the Kyumo ninja was finally out of the door. He heard as the battle in the room behind him resumed. Good, he thought. Let them kill each other. Now he only had to get through some small fry and then he'll be on his way to Kyumo. There were only the pesky annoyances of sneaking through the front lines and reporting to A in front of him. Oh, he so wasn't looking forward to it. Prison Kiba was valiantly trying to chew through his bonds. It wasn't going well, because he couldn't activate his Shikyaku no Jutsu without hand seals and so he was stuck just with normal human teeth. Well, almost normal. But even the slightly elongated fangs of the Inuzuka clan weren't enough to cut through the thick ropes. Another problem was that it was extremely hard to twist enough to reach the bonds on his ankles with his mouth. Reaching the ones on his wrists behind his back was completely out of the question. A part of his mind reminded Kiba that even if he were successful, he'd be still stuck inside a cell in an enemy base with his hands tied, but he didn't care about it. He just had to do something. He hated the feeling of being weak and useless. And after the ambush it was hard to feel anything else. He growled in anger as he remembered Akamaru being kicked into a tree and slumping down bonelessly. He had immediately charged at the man responsible, but his tsuga was dodged. And then he didn't even know what had hit him, but he was lying on the ground, his head hurting like nobody's business and somebody kneeling on his back and binding his arms. He had been unable to do a thing. It hurt even more than his wounds. He could only bark toothlessly when some people came to Shino's cell, yelled at him for infesting the base with his bugs and then injected him with something that had knocked him out. The aburame hadn't twitched since. If Kiba's sensitive ears couldn't detect his faint breathing, He'd fear that his teammate was dead. Kiba sighed. Shino might have failed in his effort, but at least he had tried something. He on the other hand had been completely useless. That was why he tried so hard to do something at least now. If he was at least able to kick their captors or run. But first these damned ropes would have to snap first, and so far it didn't seem like it would happen anytime soon. And the young Inuzuka knew that he needed it to happen soon. He didn't even need his clan's sensitive hearing to tell him there was a battle going on in the base. Did their reinforcements arrive? The genin hoped so. He chewed at the ropes with more ferocity and still no success. Then the door to the prison swung open and 3 men marched in. They looked stronger than the usual guards. Kiba let go of the bonds and watched them warily. He became even warier as the threesome stopped in front of the cells of Team 8. "Pick them up," the biggest of the men ordered. "Guren-sama wants us to take them to base 19. We're going through the escape tunnel." Then their cells were opened and Kiba understood that their time had just run out. He tried to kick the man, but all he managed was a slight twitch. The sound ninja picked him up as if he was just a rag doll and carried him off, away from their rescuers. Kiba could only curse helplessly. "Command Center, Shutan," raising amethyst stalactites, a woman's voice called while Tenzo's sight was still impaired after the lightning flash. At least whoever had cast that had left the room. He jumped up just in time to avoid multiple spikes of red crystal sprouting from the ground. He landed on a big chunk of stone that had fallen from the ceiling and looked around for his attacker. She didn't give him the time to gather his bearings and attacked him with a large crystal pillar. The former ANBU evaded. He wondered what was going on here. This place was quite obviously a recent battlefield, the corpses strewn around being evidence enough, but he doubted that any of his students had gotten here before him. The damage around was caused by different combat style. So who was fighting whom? Did Orochimaru's lapdogs have a squabble? Considering how fanatical they tended to be, it sounded improbable, but it was a possibility. Or did some of the prisoners here try to escape? This place didn't look like it was anywhere near the holding cells, so it was unlikely too. And was that body dressed in a Kyumo uniform? It was hard to tell, considering how badly it was torn up. He was brought out of his musings by another crystal attack he barely avoided. That was a more pressing concern to worry about. He had never seen a technique like this in action, though he had heard rumors about it. He hadn't thought that there was much truth to them, but now he was learning otherwise. The crystal release was real and even more dangerous than the story suggested. He dashed out of the way of another hail of tiny crystal needles, this time raining from above. It reminded him that he had little time for theoretical musings, he had to worry about surviving this battle first. And to achieve this end, he should take some initiative. He'd lose for sure if all he did was to defend. A rustle of debris being crushed under somebody's foot gave away the rough location of his opponent. She was behind him, a bit to the left and approaching. He whirled around, throwing a kunai as he did. The woman in green dodged gracefully, continuing her charge. Tenzo engaged her in a taijutsu battle. When after about a minute nobody could gain the upper hand, Guren jumped back. "Shutan, Jade Blade," she called. Crystal blades formed on both her forearms. She then attacked Tenzo again. The Jounin just barely managed to draw 2 kunai to block her attack. It quickly became obvious that she was very proficient in this form of combat. Tenzo found himself pushed back steadily. And then one of his kunai suddenly turned into purple crystal and cracked. He didn't have enough time to evade Guren's swipe completely. Only his Jounin vest saved him from a serious injury. He quickly retreated, eyeing his opponent. Surprised, the Oto Kunoichi asked. "I can crystallize everything I touch. Metal, stone, even the moisture in the air." This wasn't good, the Konoha ninja realized. He didn't want to continue the close-range battle. So how about a long-range one? Let's see how she'd deal with some of his jutsu. Mokuton, Jubaku no Jutsu, he called. A beam of wood shot forward from his hand, splitting into several as it flew at Guren, trying to entrap her. The crystal user managed to avoid it. She then looked at the technique impressed. Then a smile appeared on her face. Mokuton? Well, if it isn't my lucky day. You must be a survivor of Orochimaru-sama's experiments, aren't you? She didn't wait for Tenzo's answer and continued. If I deliver him not only the Hyuga but you as well, I'll become his right hand. Her eyes gleaming with excitement, she attacked again. Tenzo sighed. This wasn't a lucky day for him. Base hallways Naruto just sliced a sound Chunin in half with his wind chakra charged ninjato, when he heard bells ringing. Immediately his vision began swaying wildly and everything appeared to be there at least 10 times. There was no telling which image was the real one. The young leaf shinobi sank to his knees as his sense of balance was destroyed. I hate genjutsu, he thought as he watched at least a dozen clones of a sound kunoichi approaching him with a cruel smirk on her lips. He brought up his hands in the genjutsu dispelling sign. Kai. The false images disappeared and the world was stable once again. The enemy kunoichi was almost upon him, the kunai in her hand poised to strike. Naruto rolled on the ground and kicked at her feet. She reacted fast enough to jump over his leg. But once she was up in the air, she couldn't avoid his follow-up sword slash. She fell to the ground dying. Naruto sprung to his feet. Another one. He had lost count of the enemies he killed a long time ago. But there seemed to be no end to them. He made just 5 steps when another blocked his path. This one was a big man with his right arm encased in some strange metallic device that didn't look like armor. He swung the appendage at the approaching leaf Chunin. Naruto didn't want to find out the hard way what did the gadget do, so he dodged. Then he realized it won't be enough as he noticed the air close to the device being distorted. He got out of the way of the technique via a quick kawarimi with one of the corpses. The man looked disappointed when he realized his jutsu had caused no damage. That was all he had the time to do because then a shout of "Tsuga" sounded and a furry tornado slammed into his side, throwing him far back into the corridor. Then the tornado turned into Hana. "We don't have the time for this," she shouted. She sounded desperate, quite unlike her usual demeanor on the battlefield. Naruto didn't find it strange. He'd be desperate too if it was his little brother who had been kidnapped, if he had a brother. But Hana's mental state made her prone to making mistakes. That was a dangerous mindset on the battlefield. But the kunoichi was right. They didn't have the time for this. The 4 captives can be even now carried away out of their reach or being killed. He quickly stood by the Inuzuka's side. There was a group of 5 sound ninja, probably Chunin, blocking their way and Hana was preparing another attack. "Don't," Naruto stopped her. She glared at him angrily. He paid her no mind and performed hand seals. "Futon, de Tapa," he shouted. The jutsu had a devastating effect in the enclosed space. The 5 sound ninja were swept off their feet and thrown into the wall on the far end of the corridor where they crashed into 2 guards protecting a doorway. All 7 ninja collapsed to the ground and the pool of blood spreading under them suggested that they wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Unfortunately, the powerful wind jutsu used in an enclosed space backfired on its casters as well. The winds rising in the corridor knocked the Konoha duo into the ground. They were bruised severely, but sustained no major injury. "Damn it, Tiny," Hana muttered as they climbed to their feet, "don't you know the meaning of restraint?" "You were the one in a hurry," Naruto shrugged. "And look, the path is clear now. And if I'm not mistaken, there's something important behind this door." He suspected it might actually be where the captives were held. They had searched through a good bit of the base, mostly following Hana's nose or hunches. He had tried to use Kage Bunshin to search faster, but the clones got dispelled every time some sound ninja used a sound technique. They wouldn't hurt a person much, but it was enough to destroy a clone, sometimes even when they didn't hit directly. And trying to block with a wind jutsu didn't help much, the two techniques clashing caused violent air currents that dispelled the clones too. But now it looked like they might be close to their goal. Naruto was already running towards them as he said it. Upon arriving he confirmed his suspicion. This door was thick and closed with a complex locking mechanism that included some complicated seals. It was beyond his ability to open. But fortunately for him, whoever made the door had focused all his attention on the lock and neglected other parts. So he stuffed two exploding tags under the hinges and backed off before activating them. There was a satisfying bang. Once the smoke cleared and their ears stopped ringing, they could see that the doorframe was now severely damaged. Tsuga. Hana waited for nothing and attacked the damaged door. Wait! Naruto shouted. There was no guarantee that the door wouldn't be able to withstand the hit even in its current condition. But fortunately for the girl, the hinges gave way and she fell through. Naruto and the Himura siblings ran after her. Ow, my head, she growled, picking herself from the ground. Who attacks a wall with their head? Naruto chided. She didn't answer. Her 3 dogs were barking urgently. Only now the Konoha group took notice of where they were. It was very obviously a prison. The hallway was lined with cells. Some of them still contained prisoners. But the Himuru were barking madly at an empty one. Hana ran to them and sniffed the air. Kiba was here, she shouted excitedly. Just a moment ago. So where is he now? Naruto asked, though the answer was almost obvious. There was only one other way leading out of the prison. The Inuzuka quartet confirmed that his guess was the correct one. With their goal almost within sight, the Konoha group raced after them. They broke through another door and defeated 2 sound guards who didn't even know what had hit them. Then they came face to face with a door that was much sturdier than all the others. Damn you! Hana shouted, attacking it in vain. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.